February 23, 1945, Mount Suribachi, Tewaima. Private First Class. Tadashi Yamamoto crouched in a concrete bunker, hands trembling as he wrote words that would have earned him execution if discovered by his own officers. The Marines are not human. They do not die like other men. Everything we were told about American weakness was a lie. Through the firing slit, he had just witnessed something that contradicted every assumption drilled into him during training. 6 Marines had stormed his position under withering machine gun fire. 3 fell, but the others kept advancing. When his comrades unleashed a grenade barrage, one Marine absorbed the blast with his own body to shield his squad, then continued fighting with catastrophic wounds until he physically could not hold his weapon. The survivors took the position within minutes. 21,000 Japanese defenders occupied Iwo Jima, dug into 18 kilometers of tunnels and fortifications. They had been promised they faced soft American troops who would break under pressure. What they encountered instead would shatter every military assessment the Imperial Japanese Army had made about their enemies. The mathematics of this miscalculation were being written not in strategic plans, but in the savage reality of close quarters combat that would leave 26,000 Marines as casualties in just 36 days. The collapse of Japanese confidence had begun long before Iwo Jima. August 7, 1942, Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, veteran of the China campaign where Japanese forces had seemed invincible, wrote in his diary after the first week of fighting, "The Americans who landed are different from any enemy we have faced. They do not retreat when surrounded. They do not surrender when their position becomes hopeless. Most disturbing, they fight at night as if darkness gives them strength rather than fear." Guadalcanal was Japan's first defensive battle in the Pacific, and the Imperial Japanese Army expected an easy victory over inexperienced American forces. The 1st Marine Division that came ashore numbered just over 16,000 men. Japanese military intelligence had described Marines as elite troops, yes, but still Americans, products of a soft, democratic society that valued individual comfort over collective sacrifice. Within days, every assumption proved catastrophically wrong. Lieutenant Shigeru Fukudome commanded a reinforced company ordered to retake Henderson Field on the night of August 20th. His unit of 200 men had defeated Chinese divisions 3 times their size. They advanced in textbook fashion, confident that Americans would panic in darkness. The Marines were waiting in carefully prepared positions with interlocking fields of fire. Fukudome's company walked into a killing ground. What happened next defied everything in Japanese tactical doctrine. Rather than fortify and defend, the Marines immediately counterattacked into the darkness, using automatic weapons with devastating precision. Fuku's diary, recovered after his death 3 days later, recorded his shock. "They attacked us in the night. We are the ones who attack at night. They moved through jungle we considered impenetrable. They killed in silence, then vanished. By dawn, 90 men remained from my company. The Americans had suffered 12 casualties. The pattern repeated across Guadalcanal. Japanese forces, accustomed to enemies who crumbled under banzai charges, discovered Marines who held positions until physically overrun, then fought hand-to-hand with bayonets, knives, and fists. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, who survived 4 months on Guadalcanal before evacuation, wrote in a letter intercepted by American intelligence, "We were taught the Americans are individualistic, that they will not sacrifice for their comrades. This is false." I watched a Marine machine gunner continue firing, with both the legs shattered, until Japanese infantry killed him at arm's length. His assistant immediately took the weapon and continued firing. We lost 40 men to that position. The Marine training that created such soldiers baffled Japanese military analysts. Private Yamamoto, who would later face Marines on Iwo Jima, first learned of them during intelligence briefings in 1943. The instructor, a staff officer who had interrogated captured Marines, seemed genuinely disturbed. The American Marines undergo training that would be considered criminal abuse in any civilized army. They are broken down mentally and physically, then rebuilt into something that barely resembles the soft civilians who entered. They are taught to view death in combat as honorable, to never surrender, to fight until physically incapable. This sounds familiar. Yes, they have copied our Bushido, but added something we did not anticipate: American industrial capacity. The combination proved devastating. Japanese soldiers trained in the code of Bushido expected death before dishonor, but they fought with equipment increasingly inferior to American weapons. Marines underwent training nearly as harsh as Japanese soldiers endured, creating warriors just as willing to die. But those Marines landed with overwhelming firepower that made Japanese positions untenable. November 20th, 1943. Tarawa Atoll. Rear Admiral Kei Shibasaki commanded 4,500 defenders in fortifications considered impregnable. The 2nd Marine Division proved him wrong in 76 hours. Private First Class Tadashi Ogawa, one of only 17 Japanese survivors, told interrogators what he witnessed. The first wave was massacred in the water. We killed hundreds. More craft arrived. The second wave died on the beach. More came. The third wave reached our positions with flamethrowers. They did not stop until we were dead. Or they were. The mathematics were brutal. Nearly 6,400 men died on Tarawa in 76 hours. The Marines who survived had demonstrated they would take any objective regardless of cost. Documents captured on Saipan in 1944 revealed Japanese intelligence reports describing Marines as, quote, shock troops displaying fanatical devotion to objectives. Marines refuse orders to retreat and will counterattack even when tactically disadvantaged. Casualties inflicted on Marines do not degrade unit effectiveness until the unit is completely destroyed. End quote. This classification emerged from systematic study. Captain Yoshio Kobayashi, who survived Guadalcanal, provided detailed comparisons. American Army infantry tactics are sound and conventional. The Marines operate differently. They advance aggressively regardless of casualties. They accept casualty rates that would cause any rational commander to halt. This is unprecedented. The speed of Marine operations proved as devastating as their firepower. Lieutenant Colonel Kunio Nakagawa, who commanded on Pelu, planned defenses based on previous campaigns where American forces paused after landings. The Marines never paused. They landed September 15th at 8:30 and controlled half the airfield by nightfall. Nakagawa's diary recorded his shock. My defensive plan collapsed because it assumed the enemy would act rationally. The Marines do not act rationally. They act with total commitment regardless of circumstances. This total commitment manifested in ways that seemed suicidal to Japanese observers, but proved devastatingly effective. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, captured on Bougainville, described watching a Marine platoon assault a fortified hilltop position. The approach was across open ground swept by machine gun fire from 3 bunkers. Japanese doctrine would have required extensive artillery preparation, followed by infantry assault under smoke cover. The Marine lieutenant assessed the position for perhaps 30 seconds, then ordered the assault with no preparation. The platoon charged directly into the fire. 7 men fell in the first 20 seconds. The survivors reached the first bunker and destroyed it with grenades and demolition charges. 3 more men fell assaulting the second bunker. The remaining Marines took it. The third bunker fell to the last 5 men standing. The platoon suffered 12 casualties from 37 men to take a position we considered impregnable. The entire action took 4 minutes from order to completion. This was not courage. This was systematic application of acceptable casualties to achieve objectives faster than we could respond. The concept of acceptable casualties horrified Japanese officers trained to value their soldiers' lives within the context of achieving objectives. Marines calculated casualties as the cost of victory and paid that cost without hesitation when the objective warranted it. This created a psychological advantage beyond material superiority. Japanese commanders, knowing Marines would accept 50% casualties to take a position, faced impossible decisions. Defend with insufficient force and lose the position. Defend with adequate force but weaken other positions. Abandon the position and cede terrain. Every option led to defeat. The only variable was timing. Major Yoshi Takahuri, senior staff officer on Yoima, who survived the battle, analyzed this dilemma in post-war interrogations. General Kuribayashi understood that we could not stop the Marines. Our defenses were designed to delay them and inflict maximum casualties. We succeeded brilliantly at inflicting casualties. Over 20,000 Marines were killed or wounded in 36 days. This would have destroyed any other military force's ability to continue offensive operations. The Marines reinforced and continued attacking without any reduction in intensity. We calculated that inflicting 10,000 casualties would halt their advance for at least a week. They suffered 10,000 casualties in the first week, and their advance never slowed. This revealed the fundamental imbalance. They could replace casualties faster than we could. They had 50 Marine divisions in the Pacific Theater, or training in the United States. We had finite defenders on each island. Their supply dumps contained more ammunition than my entire regiment possessed. They had mobile kitchens preparing fresh meals. They had portable showers and laundry facilities. They were fighting the most intense battle of the Pacific War and living better than we did in garrison. This demonstrated that defeating them was impossible. They would never run out of food, ammunition, medicine, or replacements. We would. The relentless American logistics created a form of attrition warfare that favored Marines. Despite higher initial casualties, Japanese defenders fought from fixed positions with limited supplies and no reinforcement. Every casualty was permanent. Every round of ammunition expended could not be replaced. Marines fought from an expanding beachhead, with supplies arriving daily by ship and air. Casualties were evacuated and replaced. Ammunition was unlimited. The longer a battle lasted, the weaker Japanese defenders became while Marines grew stronger. This dynamic proved decisive on Palalur, where Colonel Nakagawa's defense lasted from September 15th to November 27th. 1st Marine Division suffered such heavy casualties that it was withdrawn and replaced by elements of 81st Infantry Division in October. A 2nd Marine Division continued operations until Army units relieved them. The battle that Japanese planners expected to last 1 week lasted 11 weeks. Japanese defenders inflicted over 10,000 American casualties, but the Americans could afford those losses and continue attacking. Japan could not afford to defend every island at such cost. The arithmetic was unsustainable. The unsustainability became clear to Japanese military leadership by mid-1944 intelligence. Summaries distributed to garrison commanders acknowledged that Marines could not be stopped, only delayed. One document captured on Tinian provided guidance that revealed complete abandonment of any hope for victory. When defending against Marine assault, do not expect to hold positions indefinitely. The objective is to delay the American advance sufficiently to enable other strategic objectives. Each day of resistance is valuable. Each Marine killed or wounded is valuable. But understand that the position will fall. Prepare accordingly. Stock positions with maximum ammunition. Create redundant defensive positions. Plan to fall back in stages. Accept that you will likely die in the defense. Your sacrifice buys time for the Empire. There is honor in this sacrifice. Even without victory, this grim calculus defined Japanese defensive strategy for the final year of the Pacific War. Defenders no longer fought to win battles. They fought to make those battles so costly that Americans might negotiate rather than invade Japan itself. Marines, by accepting casualties that would have forced other armies to halt, negated this strategy. They paid the price demanded and continued advancing. No cost was too high. No position was too strong. The offensive never stopped. Private Tadashi Gawa, one of the few survivors from Tarawa, later described the psychological impact of facing such an enemy. After the first day of battle, we knew we would lose. The Marines had landed in overwhelming force. They had naval gunfire that destroyed our positions. They had air support that bombed us continuously, but we still believed we could make them pay such a terrible price. They would reconsider future invasions. Then we watched them continue attacking despite horrific casualties. They walked through machine gun fire that killed dozens. More Marines came behind them. We killed them too, more came. We fought for 3 days with absolute commitment. We inflicted thousands of casualties. We died almost to the last man, and the Marines took Tarawa on schedule. They paid the price we demanded and continued their advance across the Pacific. That was when we understood the war was lost. An enemy who will pay any price to win cannot be defeated by making victory expensive. This realization spread through the Japanese military as survivors from each battle carried their experiences to the next. By the time Marines landed on Iwima in February 1945, every Japanese defender knew they faced the most implacable enemy in the Pacific. They knew they would die. They knew the Marines would take the island. The only question was how many Marines would die with them. General Kuribayashi's defensive plan accepted these realities and built strategy around them. His orders to troops acknowledged what official propaganda denied. "We cannot win this battle. We can only make the Americans bleed for every meter of ground. That is our mission. Accept death. Inflict casualties. Delay their advance. This is how we serve the Empire in its darkest hour." This assessment proved accurate in battle after battle. February 19, 1945, D-Day Onima provided the most comprehensive Japanese military analysis of marine capabilities. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, arguably the most capable defensive commander Japan fielded in the Pacific, spent months studying marine tactics and creating defenses specifically designed to defeat them. His preparations were extraordinary, but before I tested Kuribayashi's theories, Marine raiders had demonstrated capabilities beyond standard excellence. These elite units conducted deep penetration operations that created terror disproportionate to their small numbers. Japanese forces discovered that raiders operated in darkness with devastating effectiveness. Colonel Kono Ichiki learned this fatally on Guadalcanal in August 1942. His 900 men had defeated Chinese forces through aggressive night attacks. Japanese doctrine held that Americans feared darkness. Ichi planned a textbook night assault against Marine positions on the Tanaru River. Raiders from 1st Marine Raider Battalion waited in prepared positions. Ichiki's force waded into the river at 01:30 hours on August 21st. Raiders opened fire at point-blank range with automatic weapons supported by pre-registered artillery. The battle lasted 20 minutes. Japanese casualties exceeded 700 killed. Marine casualties numbered 35. The raiders were eventually disbanded and integrated into regular Marine divisions in 1944, but their tactics spread throughout the Corps. Standard Marine infantry employed techniques raiders had pioneered. Night patrols probed continuously. Small units made independent decisions. Communications allowed unprecedented coordination. The result was an enemy that fought 24 hours per day with intensity Japanese forces could not sustain. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, who fought on 3 islands before his capture on Okinawa, summarized the experience. "The Marines never stopped. Day attacks with overwhelming firepower. Night attacks by small units infiltrating our positions. Constant artillery harassment preventing rest. Air attacks throughout daylight hours. We were under pressure continuously from landing to defeat." Japanese forces traditionally controlled the night and could rest and regroup after daylight battles. Against the Marines, there was no rest. There was no safe time. There was only continuous combat until we were dead or captured. This was industrial warfare applied without mercy. The industrial aspect of Marine operations fascinated and terrified Japanese military analysts. Unlike Japanese forces that relied on spirit and individual sacrifice to overcome material limitations, Marines systematically applied maximum force to every problem. When faced with a fortified position, they did not rely on courage or clever tactics. They identified the position, called in artillery that fired hundreds of shells to destroy it, brought forward tanks with flamethrowers to burn out survivors, then sent infantry to secure the position. If resistance continued, naval gunfire from destroyers or battleships would obliterate the entire area. This methodical destruction was horrifying in its efficiency. Second Lieutenant Saburo Endo, artillery forward observer on Saipan, watched Marine combined arms tactics during the June 1944 invasion. His diary recorded detailed observations. The Marines landed under covering fire from warships that fired continuously for 3 hours before the first landing craft touched the beach. Aircraft bombed our positions for 2 hours before the landing. When Marines came ashore, every movement was supported by tanks, artillery, naval gunfire, and airstrikes. They advanced slowly and carefully, destroying everything in their path. When we stopped them at prepared positions, they called in battleship fire that literally erased hills from the landscape. They did not try to overcome our positions through courage or clever tactics. They used overwhelming force to eliminate the positions, then advanced. This is not warfare as we understand it. This is industrial destruction, applied systematically until resistance becomes impossible. We fought with rifles and light machine guns. They fought with an entire industrial nation's resources. Endo's observations captured what many Japanese soldiers realized too late. The Pacific War was not a test of warrior spirit or tactical excellence. It was a contest between Imperial Japan's limited industrial base and America's overwhelming production capacity.